education. We have about 90 minutes for this important dialogue on gender in our schools. We'll begin with a few words from Dr. Kristen Ross-Cully from the Jesuit School Network. Dr. Cully planned this panel over a year ago and intended to be here with us today to lead the conversation. She's recently welcomed a new baby girl into her family. Virtually to introduce our conversation. Dr. Cully.
It's a joy to be here to introduce this conversation on women in Jesuit education. I'm Kristen Ross-Cully, and I currently serve as Director of Research Development and Global Initiatives with the Jesuit Schools Network. This is my 20th year in Jesuit education, and prior to the JSN, I was principal of Loyola School in New York City and assistant principal of Regis High School, also in New York before that, and a counselor and a teacher before that. I have been studying and learning about and researching women in our schools for over 8 years now. And my only disappointment today, as we open this conversation on such an important stage at the colloquium, is that I cannot be there in person as I had intended since we first started planning this panel conversation over a year ago. I just had a baby girl about 2 weeks ago. She came a bit early, and I'm now on maternity leave, which is actually a fitting place to be as I introduce what I hope is a great conversation on the meaningful contribution and experiences of women in our schools. I think it's fair to say that we have not spent enough time thinking about the important dimension of gender in our schools. There is great irony in this, of course, as so many of our schools are single-sex and are therefore shaped around gender itself. I hope we can think of this conversation this afternoon as a consciousness raising, where we seek to explicitly expand conversation and connection in areas where we have been largely quiet and isolated. As we all know, there is great power that can come when we put voice to areas where we have been silent. Diversity in all of its forms is a critical aspect of leadership. We learn from and with one another by connecting on similarities and being informed by differences. In engaging together in an inquiry on gender, we are creating space for our collective learning around a topic that is at the heart of our shared mission: nurturing and building inclusive communities. With a lens of thoughtful discernment, I am excited to see not just where our conversation takes us this afternoon, but also beyond. My own research on exploring the experiences of women working in all-boys Jesuit schools began years ago as a personal curiosity and desire to reflect on my own experience as a female leader in our schools. It occurred to me that in all my years as a faculty member, I never really had an explicit conversation about how being a woman may influence my work with students, boys in my case. For whatever reason, gender was a seldom discussed aspect of our community, and I sought to change that. In recent years, I've had the pleasure of sharing the learning I cultivated with so many of our schools, and this year's National Spotlight on the culture of gender in our country has brought about a new lens on this work. As our attention turned to the Me Too movement, the Kavanaugh hearings, and record numbers of women leaders in Congress, conversations exploded across our schools in ways that brought the topic of gender to the forefront of the minds of our students and faculties. This is no longer something that was on the minds of a few of us, and being able to talk about gender in real and meaningful ways with our students and our colleagues became more important than ever. When it comes to sharing stories of the experiences of being a woman in Jesuit education, I have always been inspired by St. Ignatius's focus on the experience. Isn't that what we are always interested in? The experience of our students? As educators, we think a lot about, for example, the experience of a student of color in a school where she may not see many peers that look like her. The experience of a student who hails from a lower socioeconomic background in a school where most others do not. The experience of a student who is struggling with issues of sexuality. What is his experience like in our homes? So, what is the experience of being a woman in Jesuit education? This is not a simple question to answer, but I hope this afternoon we will be successful in peeling back the many layers of this complex experience. As I think about caring for our students, I firmly believe it is our responsibility as Ignatian leaders to have an awareness around the education we provide young men and young women around gender. This sends an important message that our schools care about this within the umbrella of the education that we provide. I believe our call as Jesuit educators in this Me Too era is that this conversation is bigger than us. It is about our mission. We launch students to universities that are awash in this conversation. And then our students may go on to the corporate world, like Google and Uber, for example, that are as well. Our job is to make sure that our students are informed about gender education, that their consciousness is raised on gender, that they understand and feel at ease with things like consent, unconscious bias, how to reject sexism, and see all of this as an issue of justice. They know that we know that this conversation is messy and complicated, but we're not afraid of it, and we are able to enter into it without fear. As with everything we do, we cannot shy away from what may be hard conversations. That silence sends a message too. Conversations like we are having right now are so important. I propose that Jesuit educators ought to be leaders in this conversation on building gender awareness in our schools and among our students. Given our mission, our focus on relationships, on seeing God in all things, on valuing the person sitting in front of us, on being bridges in the context of hope and mission, it ought to be something we do so well that we are proud of it, that it is a hallmark of Jesuit education. Now, it's important to have a sense of the current reality of our schools on gender. And I offer here some data that will add context to this conversation. When we think about student gender of our schools, we have 82 schools in the JSN, 12 are Cristo Rey, 17 are nativity schools, and 53 are traditional schools. Of the 82 schools, 55 are all boys and 27 are co-ed. Of the 53 traditional schools, 36 are all boys and 17 are co-ed. When we think about faculty and staff gender in our schools, and this data is plucked from the JSN annual report, which is available to everyone on our website. Across the 5 provinces, including all our schools that make up the JSN, laymen and Jesuits make up a range of faculty and staff on average from the high end, 61%, to the low end, 51%. Lay women make up a range of faculty and staff on average from the high, 48%, to the low, 39%. Now, I would note that these reported numbers can be challenging to gauge, considering the varying roles in our schools, who is considered staff or support staff, for example, or teaching faculty at various institutions. It's also important to capture a glimpse of gender at the top positions in leadership in our schools. Of all of our schools across the network, we have 8 women serving as president. 4 are in high schools, 1 of those is a Cristo Rey school, 2 are in our traditional all-boys schools, and 1 is a traditional co-ed, and 4 presidents are in nativity schools. We have 24 women serving as principal, 19 are in high schools, 5 are Cristo Rey, 14 of these are in traditional schools, and of those 14, 3 are female principals of all-boys schools, 5 are nativity schools, and 1 religious woman is in that role. So those numbers give us a lot to think about. From this data, we can understand that on average, most of our schools have a solid balance of women in the middle, the faculty and staff level, but we are certainly thinner at the top layers of leadership. The history of Jesuit schools can account for some of this gap in leadership, remembering that for much of their histories, Jesuit schools were staffed mostly by Jesuit priests and brothers, with the first women not starting to work in many of our schools until the late 60s and early 70s. So we've come a long way, but I'm sure that we can all agree that we have a long way to go. As we move into hearing the thoughts and insights of our esteemed panel, it's important to know that we do not have a deficit entry into this conversation. The idea of contributions and experiences of blessings and challenges is important to keep at the front of our minds. It's also crucial to know that this conversation is not just about boys' schools. Gender is just as relevant a focus at co-ed schools, and we all spend our days in what has historically been a predominantly male network. I'm so grateful to the 7 members of our panel for saying yes to being a part of this discussion, and to Tara Caputta for facilitating the conversation. In addition to her role at St. Ignatius in Cleveland, Tara is also an adjunct in our Seminars in Ignatius Leadership Program, and her own doctoral research and work in higher education is focused on gender studies. So she is a terrific person to moderate this conversation this afternoon. I asked this panel just about a year ago, before any of the national conversations had taken hold of our media headlines. The big idea is not that we are gender experts, but that we are leaders from various backgrounds who reflect with our head in our heart on our personal experiences as we wrestle with these often complex issues. All of us in this auditorium ought to be doing this on important issues like gender and race and socioeconomic status. We surely won't get to everything in the time that we have, but I hope that starting this conversation on this stage will prompt a lot of conversation going forward. I've always considered my work in Jesuit education to be among the greatest blessings of my life. In my roles in schools, I was tuned into the experiences and challenges faced by the women in my setting, and I wondered informally how their experience aligned or differed from my own transition into our community. I hope today's conversation will continue my quest to shine a light on our unique experience of being a woman in Jesuit education. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite each panelist to introduce themselves. It is worth remembering that none of us began our careers as presidents or principals. Each of us has worked on teaching faculties and the offices of our schools in a variety of roles. We've intentionally assembled a panel with diverse backgrounds that mirror the diversity of our schools in terms of geography, role, gender, and school model. We recognize that we cannot have a full conversation on gender with only women, so we have included men as well. We are grateful for each panel member's willingness to share his or her stories here today. Please start at the end and introduce yourself.
My name is Len Altilia, Jesuit of the Canadian province and PACE for Canada. I've been involved in Jesuit education. This is my 50th anniversary from when I started Regency. During that time, I was a full-time teacher as a scholastic. After ordination, went to school as a chaplain, became a principal, went to second school, and then president twice. So I kind of been around the block a little.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Capillari. I happen to be a graduate of and former teacher of 2 of the first co-ed Jesuit schools. I'm a graduate of Scranton Preparatory School. I also went to Holy Cross, and since then I've worked and taught 26 years in Jesuit high schools. I spent 26 years always teaching. I just finished my calculus class about a month ago, and 12 of those years in administration overlapping with my teaching experience. I was hired in 1993 at Loyola School in Manhattan. I spent 8 years there. I worked 6 years at Regis High School, also in Manhattan, and then returned to Loyola School to be their first female dean of students. I was there for 10 years. And my past 2 years have been a bit of a whirlwind. I returned back to my hometown to become assistant principal at Scranton Prep, only a year later to become principal and rounding out my first year. It's been great. I'm really excited to be here.
Welcome everyone, my name is Ken Hickey. I'm currently the president of Seattle Preparatory School, just entering my 13th year. Many years ago, I practiced law and stopped doing that to become a theology teacher. I've been involved in Catholic schools for this will be my 32nd year, I think. 4 different schools, 2 single-sex schools, one of them in Notre Dame High, not too far from here. Marquette High School up in Milwaukee, and then 2 co-ed schools, including Seattle Prep. At Seattle Prep, in addition to being president, I've also really enjoyed coaching soccer, primarily girls soccer at Seattle Prep, and I continue to teach theology classes there. I'm married. My wife's name is Terry. She's a teacher at the School of Education at St. Martin's in Olympia. We have 3 kids, all of them went through Seattle Prep. and happily so. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Samantha Lane. I'm currently finishing, or I just finished my second year as the assistant principal for academics at Regis High School in Manhattan. Prior to that, I was the dean of academics at Loyola School with Coop and Kristen. I taught math and was department chair at Georgetown Prep for 6 weeks before that. And prior to that, I taught at an all-girls school and at an all-boys boarding school, was where I first started teaching.
Good afternoon. My name is Temple Payne. I am currently the principal at Christ the King Jesuit College Prep here in Chicago, so welcome to Chicago. I have been serving at Christ the King for the last 8 years as principal. I have been in education 23 years, most of that spent in Chicago public schools. I am married and I have 4 daughters and expecting my first grandchild in another week or so, which is also a girl.
Hello everyone, my name is Adria Reiki. I'm the president of Brophy College Prep in Phoenix, Arizona. My background is slightly different than the rest of yours. I've been at Brophy for 22 years, served as the president going into my 4th year. Prior to that, I was a writer. I wrote books on education and went on the circuit for Title I schools, homeschooled people in Arizona that had no resources for educational help. I wrote a column in the Arizona Republic, and then I think the Jesuits got a hold of me. And what's the great quote from the article? Yeah, I was done, toast. Yeah, so here I am today, and welcome everyone.
As we begin our discussion, it's helpful to be aware of some key findings that evolved from Kristen's research study of the women at Regis High School, as these findings serve as useful lenses for this conversation. First, women in our schools have an awareness of carrying gender across many layers of professional life. From the way they dress to the spaces they inhabit in school, they're aware of their gender and how it impacts their work. They're tuned in to how gender influences the way that they navigate the social norms of the school, like the disciplinary culture, the communication culture, and the ways that they assimilate into the community as a new or young female faculty member. Women are aware of their potential to be role models to students in a setting where female faculty may be in the minority. Women in Jesuit education, broadly speaking, see their work as deeply connected to mission. In particular, their presence in our schools can sometimes serve for our students as a bridge to the other and an opportunity to help them to navigate difference. And finally, the lasting effects of this conversation are powerful for our communities. The opportunity to affirm women as leaders and men as allies is among the most powerful reasons to shine a light on gender in our schools. We will now enjoy hearing personal reflections from our panelists on the topic of gender in our work. We will display each question on the large screen behind us, along with the names of those panelists who will be responding to each question. Our first question is this: with the lens of gender, how have you experienced your own professional growth in your school? What was it like to be the first?
Thank you, Tara. First, I just have a disclaimer. I feel very fortunate. I fell in love with Jesuit education with no ambition to be an administrator. I just love teaching and accompanying our students on retreats and service trips. I'm sure that story is so familiar to everyone sitting in here. And I just was really lucky to work in 3 schools where I was often invited to be able to collaborate and to give voice and to participate in decision-making at times, even before I was an administrator. At Loyola, the school's so small, you all have to do something. So we're very lucky at Loyola that we all had a chance to have a strong voice. At Regis, I was tapped to do the Ignatian seminars and to have a voice there. And as Grand Prep, I walked into a school where I feel people's voices are heard, or at least that's my hope as someone who's now on the leadership team. So I was mostly surprised to be tapped for those types of situations. And in the same way that we treat our students with pure personalities, I felt that I was treated with the eye of pure personalities. What gifts might I bring? What perspective might I bring? As someone who graduated from a high school, a Jesuit high school, as someone who teaches math, as someone who is a country bumpkin, had to commute to her school, as someone who lived in New York City. So when I was the first dean of students at Loyola, who was female, but I had worked there so much, it just didn't feel that much of it. It wasn't much of an event for me. I know that it was important to some people that I would address all the short skirts, so that was kind of something I didn't like having as something appropriate to my gender. And at Scranton Prep, same as at Loyola and at Regis, there were a lot of women in leadership already. So when I became assistant principal, I replaced the female assistant principal, and then this past year, I am the first female principal. I like to say I'm also the first 5'3" principal. I'm the first principal who is kind of an outsider. I come from New York City, even though I graduated from the school. So I feel that in the year that I was working as assistant principal, I developed a very good relationship with our president, Father Ryan Maher, who seemed to love me for who I am, flaws and all. Loves me for my sometimes irreverent humor, sometimes cursing words that we're all taking bets on whether I can keep at bay during the for being emotional and caring, for being impatient with things, for being a rule follower and a rule breaker, a rule questioner. So when I applied for the job of principal, which was really quick, a lot of change in my life, I wasn't thinking about my gender, I was thinking about what could I maybe bring to Scranton Prep. And you spend a lot of time when you're applying for a job, which you all know, thinking about your challenges, your strengths. Is this a good fit for me? Am I a good fit for them? And Father approached me and said, you know, we do a press release, which was so odd to me, because in New York you would never do a press release for your principal's job. And he said, would you like me to include that you're the first female principal at Scranton Prep? And I just paused and I said, is that why you hired me? And I thought I was hired for my 25 years of experience in Jesuit education. I said, I'd like the article to say that. I said, I think they'll figure out that I'm a woman, and and we'll let people make their own judgments. And that's not at all to demean anyone for whom it's really important to be the first female or the first this or the first that. But for me, I spent so much time just being sure that I was doing the right thing for me. At the same time, I'm very mindful that my being a woman is very important to other people. I got these very unfeminine fist bumps from women on the faculty, you know, and in the community that, yeah, you're the first woman, you're going to carry the torch. I got a lovely letter after football season from the head of the Parents Club, who told me that when I was announced as principal, the whole football team was very upset about this. And wasn't sure how it was all going to work out for them. I'm not exactly sure what role the principal plays in but apparently it was very important in Scranton Prep. And but I got a very nice email after the season. A little rougher on the edges of the email was when told me that the boys were talking about me after the fact and saying they were very pleased. Again, I don't know what role I played. I stood on the side and watched the games, but whatever I did well, I guess. I will tell you, I am struck to be the first female alum who's a principal at Prep. When I think of myself as a freshman at Scranton Prep, all the administration were men or Jesuits or, you know, and there were no female leaders. I didn't have trouble imagining myself as being a teacher someday. I had female teachers, but I never imagined myself to be an administrator. I don't know if that's because I just never imagined myself to be an administrator, but so I think from that, like to look back, I guess it's like 35 years now, how far Jesuit education has come. I think that's such a tribute. Even in hearing everyone sing at the colloquium, I was at the very first colloquium, but it was very tenor, bass, and baritone. and today, it's a wonderful harmony of sopranos and altos, along with those tenors and basses. So I think it's exciting, and I'm very humbled and proud, and I feel the responsibility that Tara mentioned, that we are all role models, and all the different layers that we wear matter. So as a female administrator, I wear that lens for other people. I have to be mindful of that, but so do female teachers, and so do male teachers when they talk to female students, and it just goes on and on. We could do it all day long. So it's just an interesting balance between what my view is and what people's view of me is.
So let me set some context in true Jesuit fashion here. I've been at Brophy for 22 years. I was a VP there. I was named the interim president during the search, and from the get-go, it was widely known that the trustees were looking for a Jesuit. The whole world knew it. I was one of the applicants. Even after the deadline had passed, the whole world knew they were going to continue to look for a Jesuit. So, A, I was the first non-Jesuit president. B, I was the first lay president. C, I was the first woman president in an all-male 6 to 12 grade Jesuit school. Who were my biggest advocates? The Jesuits. Truly. It was the lay trustees who continued to proceed as if they could find a Jesuit president. And by the time I was announced, I told my principal, Bob Ryan, today I felt like I won the consolation prize. Okay, there's nobody else. And that's kind of how it went, right? You're nodding. Okay, so 22 years ago. I was often the only lay person in meetings, 22 years ago, and still today, among presidents, depending on the region, I can still easily be the only female in the room. My president that preceded me hired me. He was extremely gender blind and exposed me to absolutely everything a president could be exposed to. What's our challenge as women? The mission is our challenge, whether you're a man or a woman. The mission is our challenge. This is not a gender challenge. Keeping our eye on the Jesuit wall is our challenge. Staying focused to build the kingdom of God, that's our challenge, man or woman. And I don't want to speak for any lay president, man or woman in this room alike, but I believe that the biggest challenge is not our gender, and it's up to us, ladies, as you know. It's not a challenge for us. We go in every day, we put our shoes on, and we do our jobs, just like you guys do. All right? What's our focus? Our students. Making sure we care about their formation in the Jesuit charism. What's our other focus? Our faculty and staff. Because as the numbers decrease, what's the statistic here? From 1982 to 2010, the Jesuits around the world decreased by 50%. So lay folks, man or woman, it is up to us. It is up to us. Now, Michael Gilson set me up this morning. I'm so proud of you. Where are you, Michael Gilson? Because I've been talking to Bill Muller about Mother Church, Mother Church, Mother Church. And here we are in a patriarchal setting, all right? But Mike said this morning, his quote, referring to the Holy Spirit. And Michael Gilson said it was her job. She is breathing. Trust her spirit. That's where we are, and that applies to all of us. Clearly, paradigm shift, women in leadership, carrying the vision and the mission. So my answer to all this for my whole life, I've always been comfortable in uncomfortable situations, kind of a challenge. But Mike again reminded me about what's important about Jesuit education. We cannot focus on the gender noise. That's not a focus. We need to keep our heads down. We need to work harder. We need to be more collaborative. And women especially need to build more collaborative teams to model for other women that can stand up and say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Come on, hire me. It's my role to keep my eye on the ball. It's my vocation to carry the charism, and I take it as a huge responsibility. And besides that, a privilege and an honor that I never, in my wildest dreams, would have predicted would have happened to me. Organically, our boys, the kids that just came in 4 years ago, they don't know any different. They never had a Jesuit president. They think I'm the bomb, and I tell them that all the time. pizza. And there's always this pregnant pause, because you know it's the free pizza, but their mothers told them to be polite, right? All right. I love, by the way, that we have a few token gentlemen. I just had to throw that in. It's my turn. You know I love you. You can have one. You can have one. So what's our biggest concern? Our biggest concern is that organically, man, woman, lay, Jesuit, we got a big job. Our schools are expanding. The world is becoming a different place. It is up to us to set the tone in everything we do. At the grocery store, at the football games, in the classroom, during jug. They're watching us. They're watching to see how we're going to behave, because out there the noise is mighty. And it's up to us to really contradict that noise and show them the path. I am really honored and privileged. At this point, I am the grandmother of 8 grandkids. I have 3 married children. When I got the job, and I'll close with this great quote from my son, who is now out of the will. Mother, how did you get this job? Are they giving numbers at the Safeway? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'll lead off on our next question, which is the following. How have you experienced your gender influencing the way you navigate social norms at your school? It's interesting, I personally have not found so much that my gender dictates and determines how I navigate the social norms of the school, but I have found that my awareness of how I'm perceived as a result of my gender does create some complexities that I'm constantly aware of. So before coming to Ignatius, I worked as a college professor for 9 years, and most of the work that I did was in gender. The majority of my classes were dual enrollment for women's studies and English, and so the explicit questions of those courses were gender. Ironically, when I came to St. Ignatius, none of my classes at all named gender as a part of the course content. And for the most part, gender was not explicitly discussed, at least at first. But gender issues have really seemed to be just as, if not more important in this context. One way this really became apparent to me is in the summer that I was preparing to take on my role at St. Ignatius, I would tell people, oh, I've accepted a job at St. Ignatius, and you watch the wheels turn, they're kind of working out in their head, how did that happen? And then I would get advice, and the stream of advice that I heard was really interesting to me, because the thread ran as an undercurrent, and it was, you've got to have some power in that situation if you're going to be successful. I heard people say over and over, don't let those guys boss you around. Show them who's boss, be tough. I even had our principal's wife pull me aside at the new faculty party and say, make sure you don't let them push you around. And it was so interesting to me, and there was this concern, this worry for me. And the underlying assumption of that was that because I was a woman in a boys' world, I would expect to encounter some pushback. It didn't seem to matter that I had a good deal of expertise in my subject area, many years of teaching experience under my belt. In my mind, I was not at all a new teacher, but in the minds of the boys, I was a new female teacher coming into their world, and from some individual perspective, that put me at a significant disadvantage. So another assumption connected with that was that I was going to need to assert a particular kind of authority or power if I were going to be successful in that environment. And I learned a few really important lessons that first year. The first was that any attempt on my part to be authoritarian in any way or lead with any kind of iron fist was merely going to reinforce this sense of a power dynamic at work in my classroom. In an all-boys school, regardless of the diversity that you have, there is one common denominator tying the student population together, and you can run the risk, consciously or unconsciously, I think, of blending into a majority mentality, and that is the result of the gender of the students in an all-boys school. And so when I tried to lay down the law, I got pushback. The boys showed me, whether explicitly or implicitly, they were going to assert that authority back. And I realized if I wanted to reach my boys academically, if I wanted them to really see something positive about interacting with me, woman or man, I needed to take power completely out of the equation. I think there's a common misconception that feminism is an assault on masculinity. When you say the word feminism in a classroom of all boys, and you can feel them kind of tense up. And I think that really it's not about that at all. The boys are assuming, well, if you're a feminist, you're trying to reverse the power structures. But if you're a feminist, you're trying to undo those power structures so that you can work in partnership and work as equals. And so a big part of what I'm trying to do, I think, is to show them that. So I work very hard to cultivate a classroom environment where I am really a partner and an advocate for their learning. I position myself really intentionally as a collaborator, and I hope by negating the question of authority, I'm creating an environment of mutual respect, and that's one determined not by gender difference, but shared intellect.
I think that the longer I've been an educator and my roles shifted, the more aware I've become of my gender. Initially, as a 22-year-old living at an all-boys boarding school, I didn't realize much, probably because I grew up in a house with 3 brothers. At Georgetown Prep, I first became aware of the role of gender in my life, particularly in my junior math classes, because the boys felt they had seniority over me, which created a number of challenges. I wasn't quite as wise as Tara was, so I just met resistance with resistance, trying to prove myself and assert myself. I remember my department chair, who was very supportive of me, talking to me about how I was young, female, unmarried, and without children. He saw each of these as major challenges in my teaching. He said I had 2 options. I could be the maternal figure, or I could be a bee. There was not really room to hold students accountable and still be perceived as caring. He matter-of-factly explained that he and I could teach in the exact same style, tell the same jokes, give the same tests, and I would always receive weaker student evaluations strictly because I was a woman. I wasn't quite sure how to respond to that, but I'm happy to say that by the end of my 6 years at Prep, I truly believe the boys did see me as both someone who would challenge them and also someone who would support them. This took time, and it also took me allowing them to see me more. Kairos, my first February, definitely marked a huge shift in how they saw me. I let them see me as a person and my vulnerabilities. I had to let the boys in, to show them who I was and allow them to get to know me. This isn't easy for a young teacher who is trying to establish authority, but I soon realized this heart of the Jesuit education had to be the heart of my teaching. Being in a new school, as a new administrator, I was presented with a whole new set of challenges in how I experienced my gender. My work was no longer just about my relationships with students, and I found the relationships with the adults far more difficult. Initially, I would copy and paste emails from my male predecessor, and those were now viewed as curt and met with resistance. My assistant would frequently remind me that faculty didn't react or question him this way. I had to make sure everything was flowery and fluffy, which just did not feel like me. In each instance, I was asking myself, are they reacting this way because of who I am, because of my role, because of my gender? I was left questioning my effectiveness as a leader and an educator, and again, meeting resistance with resistance. Could I have high standards for myself and others, but still be seen as caring in an authoritative role? My current school has felt different though. After the shock of my first day walking into a leadership meeting where I was the only woman in a room of 20 men, I really have felt faculty went out of their way to support me. I even felt they wanted me to succeed. They support each other in a way I hadn't seen before, recognizing and naming the challenges for women in our all-boys school. This strong adult culture has played such a big role in feeling comfortable in the community and then modeling positive relationships with students. The students see faculty advocating for each other and respecting each other. They see faculty, particularly male faculty, questioning, why are we not reading more female authors or authors of color and taking the necessary steps to change the curriculum? And as a result, our boys take action too. Over a year ago, they asked to start a he, her, she group. They requested that the experience of women be last year's theme for our annual John Francis Regis Day. They'd like conversations with our sister schools and how they can better interact with young women and help make girls feel welcome at our dances, in our schools, etc. I like to think a lot of this amazing openness and support at Regis stems from our foundress and her gift of the Regis education. Her generosity set the stage for an environment supportive to women. I'm really proud and grateful to work at a school where this is our.
Thank you so much, Sam. Our third question asks our panelists to consider the following. How have you experienced the spoken and unspoken education we provide students around gender?
I have to admit that I appreciate being asked to be a part of this panel because prior to the provocation to really think about this, I have to admit that for me, gender was a bit of a non-issue as well. So here are just kind of some of my noticings and wonderings as I reflected on gender. Coming into leadership at a Jesuit school for the first time 8 years ago, I, like many of us here, heard all of the warnings, the whisperings, the admonitions to watch my step, to lead cautiously, because of the perceptions and fear of female leadership in a male-dominated environment. I came to my role as a successor to 2 males, with all male leadership around me, both in supervisory and in peer roles. As I developed my own leadership team over the years, it has definitely shifted, although unconsciously, to being predominantly female. But throughout, I have heard the calls to be sure there is male presence on the team. In and of itself, this is not a bad thing, but as I reflect on the needs of our students in a school that traditionally skewed 60-40 female, I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish or communicate with such a directive. Even throughout our network of Cristo Rey schools, females outnumbering males in the student body has been framed in discussions as an issue that needed to be addressed. In my own school, we're currently celebrating a shift toward more male applicants since the inception of our first football team 2 years ago. Add to that the fact that our girls' experience is unique in that they have to code switch to function effectively in at least 3 distinct worlds. Their home and social networks, which can often reduce our girls to a choice between seeing themselves as hypersexualized, combative antagonists, or submissive, voiceless, and invisible. The school context, in which they struggle with identity, acceptance, and peer approval. And then as a Cristo Rey school, there's corporate America. And while I'm sure that our girls are exposed to positive female role models in each of these arenas, I can't pretend to even imagine the grappling with all of the subconscious messages they receive, not only about their gender identities, but about their racial and ethnic identities as well. I don't have all of the answers, but I do think it's a conversation we must continue to engage in. Consciously encouraging and empowering our young ladies to develop an awareness of who they are as women of God and how an identity rooted in Christ can inform a positive and holistic self-image.
In addition to the power structures I mentioned earlier, one thing I thought about a lot as a classroom teacher is the way in which gender stereotypes and the expectations my students might have, not just for their female teachers, but for all women as a result of those stereotypes. I think that question is always really present for me. Research on student evaluations are really interesting if you look at the way college students tend to evaluate faculty members, and there's mixed results in some of these studies, but consistently, studies have found that students will comment favorably on women in higher education who exhibit stereotypically feminine qualities. So in the narrative evaluations, you'll see comments like, oh, she's so patient, she's so kind, she's accessible, she's available, whereas male professors tend to be praised for more stereotypically masculine qualities like rigor, being tough, being knowledgeable. And interestingly enough, recent research in the business world has shown that women can even be penalized for displaying some of the assertiveness that is typically rewarded in male employees. And that's not an absolute rule, but it's interesting to know that that trend exists. And so one important question for me is, how am I preparing our boys to encounter women in their personal and professional lives when they leave St. Ignatius in a way that isn't dictated by limiting stereotypes? I think to do that, I need to try to work to dismantle some of those stereotypes. One common one is that they believe and expect that women should be kind and nurturing, and sometimes I've even had students tell me their grade schools have kind of perpetuated this. We've had lots of female teachers, they're very kind, they're very loving, and they come to Ignatius, I think, expecting that same thing. I do work pretty hard to nurture my students, but it's not because I'm a woman. I think that our male teachers do an incredible job with this. I do it because it's what our mission calls us to do. But if we want them to grow into loving young men, we model that for them. I think as a woman, there's an extra component to that process for me. When those opportunities and teaching moments come up, when I'm nurturing to them, I always frame it to them as this is what God calls us to do as human beings. And I don't say it explicitly, but I'm hoping the subtext is it's not really required by my gender. At the same time, I'm intentionally pretty rigorous in my academic expectations, and this especially comes through, I think, in the comments that I give on student writing and in the grades. And it's, to me, an interesting social experiment to pass back the first set of essays and watch the looks on their faces, which are usually shocked. This past year, I had a student come to talk to me about his grade on his first paper, and he actually said to me, "You seem so nice." But then I got my first paper back. And I thought that was fascinating, right? That because I was nice, he was not expecting me to be rigorous. And he might have that same expectation for a male teacher as well, but he had trouble reconciling that. How could she be both? Maybe she fooled me, maybe she's not so nice. But ultimately, I hope that teaching them those qualities are not mutually exclusive in any sex. I want them to learn it's a good thing to be challenged by strong, intelligent, smart women, and that rigor and intellect are qualities that they should value as much in their female teachers as they do in the men. This brings us to our next question, which explores some more public and visible ways in which gender has come up, and sometimes quite contentiously in our cultural climate. The Kavanaugh hearings, the influx of women leaders into Congress, the Me Too movement are examples of how gender equity and bias have become a fixture within the news and public discourse. How have these conversations resonated with your experience this year?
Let me open with, if I can achieve two goals as a female president of Brophy College Prep, it would be these: to form and develop young men into the children of God they were created to be, obviously, number one, far superseding any other goal. But the second goal is for them to organically see a lived experience of a woman who is the CEO, who can make the difficult calls, who can collaborate and bring along a team of men and women, all competent. If my young men leave Brophy just taking for granted that anybody can be a leader if they're competent and hardworking, then I will have fulfilled one of my goals. The Kavanaugh hearings. I spent a lot of time looking at the sociological studies of those hearings, and boy, oh boy, what a magnifying glass. I'm going to avoid the Me Too movement because I was so taken by what I read about the Kavanaugh hearings. Research has said the power of gender roles in those hearings, whether you agree with either individual, was mighty. Democrats and Republicans agree on this. It was the nice girl model versus the good old American boy. And not much had changed except the after effects since Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. Different results. The social science themes came through loud and clear as sociologists expected. Some guys and women had written down their expectations for the hearings and were approved in spades. Men can seem more powerful with anger, and men are justified for anger because they're perceived to have that reaction, stereotypical or not, in extreme situations. They expected him to respond the way he did, while women in anger might appear hysterical. The power of the gender roles and stereotypes are alive and well. We are walking amongst an era of powerful sexism. And it is incumbent about all of us, gender, to cross the lines. I was on a subway with a dad who was a stay-at-home dad. He had 3 little kids. I said, I just gotta ask him. He was wonderful. He had all the snack, he had everything he needed to have. And they were darling little kids. I said, what's your biggest challenge? You're gonna flip. He said, the women in the park won't talk to me. Really? He said, you know, we go to the bar, it's the pleasantries, how are you, nice day, blah, blah, blah. And they all go off by themselves, and I'm there with my kids. We're just men and women. But I think in our schools, I honor you in the classroom with boys. You do have a much greater role on a one-to-one basis than I do as the president. And it's a hefty responsibility. The nuances of your job, in my view. Again, we need to know where we're going as men and women. And we need to know what we are going to put up with our young men and our young ladies, and what we're not going to put up with. And it's up to us to be strong. I'll close with, I kind of refer to myself as Switzerland, like Dean Higgins, he does that stuff, that junk stuff. And if it gets really bad, then Bob Ryan does the other stuff. And I'm kind of the last resort, but I see myself as the neutral party, and they kind of see me that way until I'm not. And it's unexpected if you lower the boom. And once again, that's a mighty lesson. Wait a minute, she just smiles a lot, and she's real compassionate, and she really likes us, and the door is always open, but watch out. And that's what I would like to leave them with, that we can all make tough decisions. It's a tough time, guys. Let's dig in.
It's any consolation to you later. I get the same reaction as a priest. How can you a priest treat me like that? But I had to make those hard decisions. In the Canadian context, we had similar dynamics to what was expressed in the Kavanaugh hearings, the Me Too movement, and things like that. It's a bit of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of dynamic that goes on. You think you're making progress, and then something happens and it loses energy. For example, in our last federal election, the Prime Minister, the newly elected Prime Minister, appointed a cabinet that was equally divided between men and women. Unhappily, 2 of the higher profile women have since left the cabinet in a dispute with the Prime Minister. They didn't agree with the approaches that he was taking in a legal matter and stepped down. That, by the way, divided the population, and interestingly enough, it divided the female population. There were some very loud voices saying they've set back the women's movement 20 years by stepping down and not hanging in there and dealing with conflict. I'm not sure how to react to that. So I think a motion on just in case. But the Me Too movement certainly has raised a level of awareness about sexual exploitation. But the thing that's happened that has had the strongest impact most recently has been a national inquiry into the situation of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, which has had the effect of heightening awareness about the plight of Indigenous women who suffer a disproportionate degree of violence compared to the general population. And this has been a very difficult and challenging experience for all Canadians, because it isn't just about Indigenous women. The findings of the inquiry can apply in some measure to relationships with other populations besides the Indigenous populations. How this resonates in schools, it depends a lot on the nature of the school, the history, the tradition, and also the cultural environment in which the school exists. In our two nativity schools, where the population is about 70% Indigenous, the questions surrounding the violence done to Indigenous women are very much at the forefront. Inevitably, this leads to serious, albeit age-appropriate, conversations about relationships, respect, social and cultural bias, and so on. Kids are conscious of this, they're aware of what's been going on, and particularly the results of the inquiry, and they want to talk about it. Two of our schools are all boys' schools, the traditional Jesuit high schools in Canada. And over the decades, we've witnessed transformation in these schools, especially with the increasing presence of strong, credible female leaders in instructional and administrative roles. Conversations that once involved only male voices and male perspectives have been changed by the presence of female voices and female perspectives. In some ways, the old boys' gang has lost its grip. And different ways of looking at situations that isn't dependent on the way we always did it. When we were all guys and it was better, that's gone. It's still a work in progress. Is it a complete transformation? No, it's not. But it's getting there. It's making progress. I just finished a 5-year stint as president of our school in Winnipeg. And in response to a demand from the students, we established a human rights group to offer an open and safe place where people can talk about important issues such as bias, injustice, mistreatment of others, etc., within their experience in the school. Curiously, given the freedom to determine the agenda for the group, the boys were eager to explore more deeply the treatment of women in society as their first topic of conversation. They wanted to know why women faced so much discrimination in society and what they could do to address that. I was both surprised and encouraged by this. It told me that there was progress. Lots more to do, to be sure, but it was a good start. And that conversation continues in that school, especially by the fact that some of the best, some of the most appreciated teachers in the school are female faculty who have managed to establish a very strong relationship with their students, and the students turn to them for guidance in how to deal with these kinds of gender issues, more readily than perhaps they turn to the male teachers. I thought what really makes the difference in these conversations is the deliberate, intentional inclusion of language, values, and attitudes that come from a deeper immersion in Ignatian spirituality. The language of humility comes from the exercise. The language of pure personalis, actually caring about the person without regard to any of the distinguishing characteristics, as it were, of an individual, just caring for the person as the person is. The language of love and action. Jesus says love is demonstrated far more when you do than what you say. The language of compassion, having experienced the compassion forgiving God who loves us though we are sinners. The language of women and men for others, where we're all called to serve together. And all of the other essential derivatives of a genuine experience of spiritual exercises. I feel that this conversation isn't rooted in that tradition, it isn't rooted in Ignatian spirituality and an Ignatian vision of what our human life is like, then we're not working at building community. We're not working, or at least we're not working at building it in an Ignatian sense, and for that it will be weak in our schools. So I think we have to continually fall back upon and stand firmly upon the solid ground of our spiritual tradition in order to have a respectful, intelligent, affirming conversation about right relationships between male and female in a real and genuine and caring community.
Thank you. Our next question will be for Kent and for Sam. Knowing that relationships are at the heart of our work as Ignatian educators, how do you see gender in the relationships you have experienced in school?
Jesuit schools are all about tables. That is a homily that I heard 25 years ago when I was at Market High from Father Frank Manchman. Jesuit schools are all about tables. I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. I remember that 25 years ago, and it sticks with me because I think our schools are all about relationships. If you were to do studies at your schools and ask why people are coming to your schools, probably the answer is always going to be academics. That's when they're coming into the school. When they're leaving the school and you ask, what did you appreciate about your school most? Yes, they'll continue to talk about the academics, but they'll really talk about the relationships that were formed throughout that time. One of the best things about Jesuit schools is that we're not really good communities, we are really good families. And sometimes we're dysfunctional families, but we're families nonetheless, and there's great beauty in the relationships in there. I feel really, really strong about that it's all about tables. And the most important table is, of course, the Eucharistic table. We are companions in the Lord. Companions, the Latin is with bread, break bread. And we've heard about that a lot, actually, already, with Mike's comments this morning. And I was even struck by the fact that the song we sang this morning was about tables. The most important table we're at is the Eucharistic table, because we are friends of the Lord. But throughout our schools, when we're at our best, we're at tables with one another. So I just want to give two examples of tables at Seattle Prep. One table that's important to me is the table where the President's Cabinet meets. And there are 12 people, 12 leaders of the school in the President's Cabinet, and it's divided half and half. It is equal that way. Now, I think when I go to those meetings, and I can look back and say, well, I bring a good perspective to these meetings, because I'm like Father Time now. I've been, doing this for 30 years and all this kind of stuff. And I bring a certain perspective from my experiences as a man, and that's what I bring to this. Now, can you imagine really how truly crappy our school would be if my perspective and my experience was the only thing we were looking at that table when we're discussing things like parental leave or such? I have also a lot of limitations to my perspective. And Terry Hickey, my wife, still reminds me of this. I remember years ago when I tore my meniscus, and I remember starting a conversation with her with the words, I imagine that giving birth is like. Yeah, that didn't go really, really well. So I try to keep that in mind too. Like I probably will, no, not probably, I will never know what giving birth is like. I should never speak about what it might be like, because knowing hell I know what it is like. So it's really important for us to have a table where the 12 of us can gather with great diversity around that table, and to have that kind of great mix at our table of male and female makes us a better school, makes us better Ignatian leaders. And the second example I want to share is this. Again, speaking like Father Time here, as I speak with our outstanding principal, Dr. Aaron Ruby, who I think is from the Chicago area. I'm not exactly sure. I do know she's a North. She's a North grad. She's really okay in most of the And so I say to her, well, it's the 100 days of May. You know what I'm talking about, right? 100 days of May. Because every time, and this will be my 26th year in administration, crap always happens in May. So I was kind of wonder, you know, what's going to be this May? And Dr. Ruby came in to say something bad has happened. And that something bad, she explained to me was, I won't go into the whole story here, but our yearbooks had already come out. Okay, our yearbooks had already come out. And what ended up happening was that a young, I think it was a sophomore yearbook staffer, a young lady, young woman, had gone to a baseball player and said, we're trying to get a catchphrase to use for each team. Something that you guys talked about and did. So we gave her a catchphrase, and I'm not going to share it here, but it's really kind of innocuous sounding. Like, no one's ever heard of it unless you go to Urban Dictionary, and then you look it up and go, when she said to me, it's bad, and I looked it up and said, oh, no, it's really, really bad. I mean, I was horrified. I mean, what this was. I mean, it's like, I can't believe this. Oh my God, it's terrible. And it was very, in addition to being awful in terms of, I would say, abusive, misogynistic, it had it all, right? And so Dr. Ruby and other administrators found out who the young man was. They met with him. He needed to come to Jesus. They gave him consequences and things that he had to do for his formation, which was really, really good. What's the best thing that happened to him, however, was another table. And this table was in the lunchroom before we even knew about it. Because this young man was seated at the table, and he'd already started to brag a little bit about what he had done to sneak that word in. And the editor of the yearbook, this senior, a young woman, he was with a couple of his buddies. She went up to the table and said, I need for you guys to leave because I need to talk to you. And she sat down with him at a table in the lunchroom and explained to him very, very, very directly that, do you know what you did by doing this? Do you know how hard we worked on this? Do you know what your actions are saying about women and about us? And she was right in his face doing this. Now, I think the actions of the administrative team and talking to that young man were really important for his growth. I think the fact that she got in his face around that table and explained how his lack of humanity had injured her community as a person was absolutely critical for the whole situation.
I spoke a little bit about relationships with students already, and I wanted to just take a minute and say how fortunate I feel to have had so many strong female mentors in my career. At each school I've been at, it was the female assistant principal who had the greatest impact on me, which is likely what influenced me to take on this role. Then, as a first-time administrator, I was blessed to have Coop and Kristen Cully as mentors in our all-female team. It was interesting that when I was hired and we were about to be this all-female leadership team, there was a great deal of anxiety about it, particularly from women. I'm not sure that until very recently there's ever been anxiety about an all-male leadership team. And to me, this shows the place for the greatest growth in our relationships with our colleagues. How do we move away from questioning each other and women feeling they have to prove themselves? Too often, it seems we create unhealthy competitiveness so that we aren't supporting each other the ways we should be. As a classroom teacher, I always felt so competitive with the other women, and I know I was not a good ally or colleague to them. This divisiveness dominated the community when really we were experiencing the same challenges. I was referred to as the ice princess by one of my colleagues, female colleagues, for 6 years. I'm not sure why, but I was afraid to reach out to other women for support. Despite the anxiety over our all-female admin team, I actually never felt competitive with Kristen or Coop. We valued each other's perspective and recognized what about each other was a challenge. And so we regularly asked each other for help, and we were collaborators with each other and strong role models to the students because we worked as a team. Now, on an all-male leadership team plus me, I realize how intentional I need to be as that strong female mentor to others. It's time that I try to pay it forward, though I'm not sure I could ever live up to the wonderful women who have been my role models. I have such gratitude for their generosity. I realize I can't just wait for colleagues to come to me for guidance. I need to be better at going to them and building relationships so that they feel valued and supported and stepping up for leadership opportunities. I'm so thankful that my mentors gave me the confidence to just go for it. I have to speak up when gender is playing a negative role in relationships. I know that I can go to my principal and say, this happened because of my gender and it's not right. And I know I'll have his full support. I was too afraid to say any of that earlier in my career. I didn't want to earn a label or disrupt the order of things. I remember actually fighting with that very same department chair because I was afraid for him to speak up on my behalf. Discerning when it's valuable to voice the gender challenges has been key and has made it so that these instances feel less frequent. Naming the problem and trusting our colleagues has to be at the core of our work. At the end of the day, I'm confident in who I am as an educator and in the support I have from my team and my colleagues. I'm always going to have high standards, wear dresses, and have a little bit of a fight in me, but I'm confident that my voice is being listened to, and I know I'm respected and valued, and I hope that we all can say that.
Thank you. This leads us to our next question, which Temple and Len will offer reflections on. From your experience, in what ways can this topic of gender be raised or lived in schools with our students and colleagues under the umbrella of justice, inclusion, and diversity?
As I mentioned before, I have seen gender as a non-issue. And for me, that prompts more questions than it does answers. In this context, how do we challenge ourselves as women in leadership to create environments that foster development of a strong female identity? And how do we do so without encumbering any of the shame or guilt that traditionally comes from a focus on self and interprets it as an exclusion of others? I think our highest and best opportunities will come from the voices of our young women themselves. They have to be brought into the conversation. And that alone, the giving of voice, is a move toward freeing them from the structures that are designed to limit them and empowering them towards self-determination. Many, if not all of our schools, offer social justice courses, or at the very least, units of study. How can we bring gender issues into the forefront and give them parity with the other hot topics of the day? What opportunities exist in our co-curricular programs to provoke thoughtful dialogue around these topics? Even these informal interactions are forming our young women and our young men. In a school where the majority of conflict and discipline involves young women interacting with each other, how do we encourage our young women to support one another rather than tearing each other down? How do we get social media in on this? And most importantly, how do we ensure that this is not just a conversation by women for women? If this conversation remains one that only women engage in, then there will be little change in the patriarchal structures within our society that then filter into our schools and inform our students' lived experience.
I'll go back a ways to offer my experience from the time when I was principal at our school in St. John's, Newfoundland. I was assigned there in 1986. It is a Catholic, publicly funded, all-boys school. And that is Canada. We have public Catholic education in some places. In the first year after my appointment, the Roman Catholic School Board of St. John's decided that its single-sex high schools, 2 for boys, 1 for girls, would become co-ed with the introduction of the other sex beginning in grade 9 and progressing over the subsequent years. Our Jesuit school, in addition to going co-ed, was to be doubled in size to accommodate an increasing population in our part of the city. 1 year into the experience of becoming a co-ed school, I was acutely aware of the need for female leadership in the school at the highest level. We had very few female teachers at that point, and this one group of girls, about 90 girls, they pull tricks, as it were, on the male faculty. All they had to say was, "It's a girl thing, sir," and that was it. Okay, the teachers would do whatever was necessary. So I was fortunate enough that the vice principal that was there with me at the time took another job, and so the vice principal's role became vacant. And so I had the opportunity to hire the vice principal. And going into the hiring, I was hoping to find a woman to assume the position, but was also committed to engaging the most competent and qualified person available. As it turned out, I got both. I was really lucky. My new VP, Maureen Duff, and I began a slow and sometimes painful process of determining how we work together. I made a lot of mistakes. It was the first time I had worked closely with a co-leader, female co-leader. I did a lot of stupid things. But instead of just kind of writing me off as a brainless male, Maureen spent a lot of time teaching me about how this should work. And our conversations led to a rather revolutionary decision. We decided to do the Myers-Briggs test, and we discovered that we were polar opposites on every one of the scales. So the insight we got was that we should redesign our administration to ensure that the various tasks were assumed by the person who was better equipped to do them, rather than according to the role of principal and vice principal. And so we labeled ourselves co-administrators and dropped the usual titles of principal and vice principal, much to the chagrin of the school board and others who expected us to maintain their traditional roles. Then we went further. We began to look at how we could promote this sort of gender equity in the school as a community. And one immediately obvious area was the student council. Typically, teams that ran for the leadership were either both boys or both girls. And we considered the idea of mandating that it had to be one of each. But we got so much pushback from the students that we decided we're just not going to go there. But the students themselves took care of that issue. They every year elected a mixed team. But usually the boy was the president and the girl was the vice president. As it turned out, the girls did all the work, the boys got all the credit. But you know what was really disturbing to me and Maureen was that none of the students considered this wrong, particularly not the girls. And when we reflected on it, we saw that this was something that was kind of ingrained in Newfoundland culture. But we had to work deliberately to change it. It took a lot of time to move that needle to the middle of shared responsibility and accountability. And I think we did it by the way Maureen and I, did our jobs as co-administrators. The kind of respect we showed each other, the way we treated our students, the way we worked together to accomplish what was needed, and the way we backed each other. So we couldn't play one off against the other. Girls would come into my office, Father, and I said, I think we should talk to Mrs. Dunn about that. Oh, forget it. They go away. Eventually, I think we were able to achieve something, not because we were that much brighter than anybody else, but just because we cared. A student talking to Mrs. Dunn later about her experience at the school said to Mrs. Dunn, we knew we could do well at Gonzaga because you and Father Len loved us. And that made it okay. Why, there was some questions in this on the materials we were given. Why is gender often seen as a non-issue? It might be a result of an attitude that the way it is the way it's supposed to be. And I think the most effective approach to changing that is to teach our students to question cultural norms. There's an old saying, fish never questions the water it swims in. Well, we have to teach our students to question the water they swim in, the cultural values that surround them, and that they will come to accept as normative unless they are challenged to question why is it that way? What are the underlying values that lead to such attitudes? How do those values stack up to the call of the gospel? How else can this be understood? What is the more loving, the more just, the more compassionate, the more responsible way of dealing with this? Ultimately, I hope the gender issue becomes a non-issue, but for the right reason. The gender equity has become a reality.
Thank you. Our final question is incredibly appropriate given that this audience gathers together current and many future leaders of our schools. From your experience, how do we build and cultivate female leadership in our schools?
I have two thoughts I'd like to share with you on this question, this very essential question. And one is about hiring practices. I think that I can fall into the rut of when I'm hiring, trying to seek out kind of the comfort of looking for my own image, right? And I've heard a Jesuit once say about Ignatius is that he did the exact opposite of that. He tried not to seek out his own image as he drew others toward him as his companions. So I think it's really important for me, for all of us as hiring, for all of us that are looking at helping leaders develop over time and such, to just make sure that we're comfortable and confident enough that we want just these diverse perspectives I've already talked about, these diverse experiences and such. I would never hire a man because he's a man. I would never hire a woman because she's a woman. I will always hire the best person for the job. But as I'm looking for the best person for the job, if I limit the pool to just people I know, or people who have the same image as I do, or even smaller for me, my own friends, which is a really small circle, if I were to just limit the possibility of moving leaders along or hiring leaders to those really small circles, well, that's never going to work for any of us. So I think in terms of developing leadership, I was struck by the comment that was made, I don't know if it was Bill last night or Mike, might have been Mike this morning, that if you were selected to come here by members of your administrative team, I really do think they are telling you something. They're saying, there's something going on with you that's pretty special. Please have this experience and take it back to the school, whatever that means. And I think that's true for all of our schools. We need to work hard to develop leaders who have the skills, right, perspective, experience, talents to really be dynamic and nation leaders. We got to keep those circles bigger so that there's a great pool and we're hiring great people. The second comment that I want to make about this is this, and I want to say that this is probably the one that I struggle the most with thinking about. I was wondering why I was asked to be on this panel, and I was thinking that maybe it's because I had great experience at a single-sex school, Market High, school that I love. And maybe it's because I'm having a great experience at a co-ed Jesuit school, Seattle Prep, another school that I love. And I hope that's the reason why I was asked to do this. When I think about this, as we're talking about leaders, and now I'm talking more about students, I really do believe that there is no better education or formation experience that any young person can have than Jesuit schools. I mean, really, I don't say that hopefully in a manner that appears arrogant. So I'm not saying it out of arrogance. I just really believe it. I really believe it to the case. So you ask the question, well, why are we excluding half the population from that if we really believe that? Now, there might be really good reasons to continue having single-sex schools. I do not think that one of those really good reasons would be that it made sense in a previous century, all right? I do think that it is really important, regardless of what a school decides about being single-sex or being co-ed, I really think no matter what, there has to be experiences where our young women and young men are working with each other, collaborating with each other, having fun with each other, enjoying their friendships. And I think it's a heavy burden to say to female teachers in our schools or female administrators, well, they got you show them the way. Well, you can show them the way, but you can't get them all the way to where they need to be because they can learn about this. The best way to learn, as we all know, is by doing. They have to be with each other to do these things. I think that's really, really essential. And I'm just going to close with this comment. I want to follow up on the yearbook story that I told you about. So the young man who did what he did, he's one of our kids. And he's probably going to be a leader today. Now, God isn't finished with him yet. God's still working on him, okay? That young woman is also going to be a future leader of our schools or our country. We can't throw any kid away, all right? But I do think that maybe when this young woman looks back at her experience at Jesuit High School and said, you know, maybe my hardest moment was having to talk to that guy about what he did. That might have been my best moment. And maybe that young man looks back at the experience and said, oh, that was hard. And my understanding is he started crying as this young woman talked to him. Oh, that was a hard experience. It's the most important experience I had in my entire life, I would say.
I just, as principal or any member of the leadership team, any of my shared leadership colleagues, I hope that we simply do for others what has been done for me, which is the same thing that we do for our students. Pure personalis. What are the hidden gems in each of us that aren't being cultivated, or that would be really important in this conversation, or important to this family? I mean, how many times has a principal, I didn't learn this like by accident, I mean, how many times has a principal said, you know, the best person to have this conversation with the student is his or her coach, or the director of the theater program. It's not me, you know. We all have so much to do with the formation of the young men and women in our care. And if we don't message that at the top as leaders, that all of us have that kind of impact, then I'm failing in my job. And I wouldn't be where I was today if the administrators who nurtured me didn't do that for me. I also feel blessed to have been a product of Jesuit education, where I was told to have a voice, and to use that voice for people who didn't have one, and to take on a situation that might be difficult because of my gender, or because of my age, or because of anything. I think I need to empower everyone on my faculty to be that person, to stand up for the students, to stand up for each other. I don't know how successful I am at that, but that's my lens. I love the reading, Father knows this, I love the reading of many gifts, one spirit. I believe that is the heart of what we are about. And I love the Arupe prayer. You know, what gives you energy? What gets you excited? That's my job. My job is to make sure that all that's being cultivated. And if I can't do it, I have to find the right colleague who can do that for another colleague. If someone on my team, like Len was talking about, is better at speaking to one of the teachers in a different department than I am, that colleague might hear some honest feedback better from somebody else besides me. I need to figure out a way how to do that, to get that going. Invitation, it's such an important part. Relationship, collaboration. These are all words that have gotten me from that shy freshman to today. It's our job to help folks see beyond their self-perceived limits. That's what we do in the classroom. That's my job with the adults I work with. Each of us has hidden gems. We each have a lived experience. We each have a perspective that's different from the other, that's unique to who we are, because we're God's creation. And so it's my job, like Ken spoke about, to make sure that when we have an opportunity for feedback, that those different perspectives are represented, and that those lived experiences are represented. I'm a female without children. I want to make sure I hear it from a parent. You know, I want to hear from someone who doesn't have children. How is that different for them? And it's my job to empower people and make them feel safe, even in uncomfortable situations. So if somebody sees their value as being limited because of their gender, that's my job to say, your gender shouldn't get in the way. If somebody thinks their religion or their faith is getting in the way of them being called into leadership, it's my job to make sure they don't feel that way, or to make sure someone's in that place to help them. So, and finally, I just think that just like we try to do with students, you know, every student should have an advocate that they feel comfortable with. Every faculty member should have an advocate that they feel comfortable with. So every time we put a team together, is there someone representing all those different perspectives, all those different voices? Do people feel like they have a door that, you know, that's open to them? Hopefully it's mine for everyone, but the reality is it might not be. So I have to surround myself with people for whom there is a way to get your voice to the top. So yes, I do think that that includes making sure that women are at the table, but I think there are all sorts of perspectives and experiences that have to be represented.
I'd like to invite you all to join me in thanking my colleagues dialogue. We can surely go on for hours. I think in a lot of ways, we've been talking for quite a while. We've only scratched the surface. But the important thing is that we've begun this conversation on this stage, which we really hope will provide greater depth and insight into the dimensions of gender as they function in our schools. There's tremendous value in shining a light on this topic and encouraging us all to be thoughtful and mindful around the culture of gender in our work. And I think we heard from the reflections of our panel members, there is always room to grow and be better in our work as we seek to fulfill the mission of our schools. Given the size of our keynote audience, we will be offering an opportunity to continue this conversation in a smaller group that is more conducive to conversation. So we will offer an Ignatian inquiry session held here in this room as a chance to talk more on the topic of gender and women in Jesuit education. Perhaps we can use the questions displayed behind me as a starting point for that conversation. So please stay after our break if that is of interest to you. There are, of course, a slate of many other Ignatian inquiry sessions held at the same time, and they will be wonderful as well, so please feel free to join those breakouts. But for those that would like to stay and speak with us in more detail, we would love to have you. Thank you again to our panel members for leading us in this conversation.